Então, gente, hoje é uma exibição bem especial. Hoje eu não vou extremar jogos, né? Hoje a gente vai fazer uma exibição especial aqui da entrevista com o Gadbois. Essa entrevista já está há um mês e meio para ser lançada. Eu tive problemas técnicos muito sérios com o PC. Eu não estou conseguindo fazer o vídeo completo, né? Então eu tive uma ideia. Eu fiz a introdução, juntei a entrevista e o encerramento, tudo assim, separado. Eu vou fazer a transmissão do conteúdo do material separado, né? Eu pensei, de repente, fazer uma série, né? Dividida em 10 partes, sendo que também não tancou. Então, a renderização do vídeo completo eu não consegui fazer. Então, o que eu vou fazer? Eu vou lançar essa entrevista separada, entendeu? Bom, eu estou fazendo. Por que eu estou fazendo essa exibição hoje? Né, nesse horário ainda? Porque inicialmente era para ser 5 horas, só que eu sempre sou problemático com transmissão ao vivo, né? Então, eu vou fazer o seguinte. Acho que estamos ao vivo, então vamos testar aqui. Temos um espectador no YouTube. Estamos ao vivo, beleza, estamos ao vivo. Não sei porque eu não consigo botar a capa aqui, mas quando terminar a transmissão, eu acredito que eu consigo a capa. Também posso fazer, criar um. Depois que acabar, eu posso deixar essa aqui privado, né? Depois lançar a versão em playlist. Fica a introdução, a entrevista separada, né? A entrevista fica em duas partes, porque não deu para fazer em uma parte única. Achei, o YouTube é cheio de gracinha, né? Não tem, agora que eu achei aqui a parada para botar a capa aqui. Ah, logo, logo faremos a exibição. Espero que todos estejam bem, espero que gostem do vídeo. Vamos lá. Tá. Mas, cai. Fazer outra interação que a gente vai ver aqui, vai ter um pouquinho mais, né? Então, pessoal, estamos a exibir Clube do Game. Obrigado pela sua inscrição no canal. Com 7 minutos. Gostaria de agradecer também ao Fragilites por seguir o canal na Twitch. Fragilites. Que estranho que está sendo exibido. Facebook. Esse é um vídeo de divulgação, pessoal, então ele vai ficar gravado, né? Dependendo do caso, eu posso também fazer a versão em legendas completa, né? Pode ser lançada também. Vamos ver como é que tá o som aqui. Assim. Vamos lá. Olha pra caramba. Certo? Então, pessoal, reforçando, né? Essa é uma live de exibição. O vídeo ele vai estar no YouTube. E eu tô fazendo a exibição agora. Provavelmente eu faço depois uma reação, né? Eu tô ajeitando o cenário aqui para caso eu venha. Sejam todos bem-vindos. Venham todos. Acomodem-se. Pouco a gente vai ajeitar aqui a parada. Bom, a gente está com um pouco de atraso aqui, porque era para começar às 5, depois às 6, às 6h30, enfim. Então a gente está ajeitando aqui o cenário aqui, montando as coisas, né? Daqui a pouco já iniciamos. Ok. Essa entrevista, né, para adiantar, ela vai ser legendada, exibida em formato legendado. Vamos também fazer uma versão internacional separada, né? Com as melhores partes da entrevista de forma sem legendas e com legendas. Porque o YouTube, ele até traduz automaticamente, mas ele não traduz de uma forma certinha toda a descrição, todas as referências, sabe? Então, é isso. Só que isso vai demorar, mas vai demorar. Outra peça mesmo. Mais uma pecinha de pano aqui para ajudar. Sim, gente, já tá pronto. Olha aí, Valdemir dando o dedo no like aí, valeu. É. Hoje, hoje eu vou fazer exibição aqui especial na Twitch, né, da entrevista. Essa entrevista ela vai ficar completa no YouTube, para quem estiver chegando aí. É, eu tava pensando em lançar uma introdução falando e tal, só assim, no vídeo e tal, mas isso aí vocês já vão ver pelo vídeo, né? Hoje é só exibição, talvez eu faça uma reação depois e tal. Voltando a comentar, né? A gente vai ver, tava tentando preparar aqui o território. Vamos ver aqui. Sendo que o chroma aqui tá pegando a minha camisa, então. Vocês vão falar com o fantasma. Mais ou menos. É, tá bravo. Olá, gente, sejam todos bem-vindos. Espero que gostem do vídeo. Eu vou lançar aqui. Então, sem mais delongas, eu vou dar seguimento então. E vamos lá. Olá a todos vocês, queridos telespectadores. Eu sou o Mestre Ryu e você está no Santuário da Nostalgia, cultura pop, focado em jogos clássicos. Este é um vídeo muito especial. Após 10 anos de planejamento, eu finalmente pude estar de frente com os meus ídolos da infância. Gadbois. Paul é compositor de diversos jogos e mais conhecido pelo seu trabalho em Greendog, jogo de Mega Drive do ano de 1992. Eu o conheci pelo seu trabalho em Batman Returns no Mega Drive também. Desde que eu conheci, bem lá no comecinho do blog Santuário do Mestre Ryu e o seu canal no YouTube, em 24 de abril de 2009, apesar que este canal ele é mais antigo, de 2006, e me inscrevi em seu canal. Logo pensei que seria um bom momento de entrevistá-lo, mas o plano seria ainda por texto. Este era um sonho antigo, um dos primeiros projetos do blog ainda não realizados e que felizmente estamos realizando agora. O mais legal é que, na época, o próprio Paul retribuiu a minha inscrição se inscrevendo no meu canal também. Então eu pensei, opa, daria para fazer um vídeo, mas ainda havia uma grande barreira, o idioma. E não havia tradutores automatizados como tem hoje, graças ao Google, que com sua tecnologia de salvar milhares de palavras e textos buscados, agora temos tradutores quase perfeitos. Em vídeo, a situação seria mais complicada, mas também foi pensado de uma forma. Se eu conseguir dessa forma, seria muito ousado. E vídeos naquela época não era algo tão comum assim, ainda mais uma entrevista internacional por um brasileiro com desenvolvedores de videogame 16 bits, né? Clássico dos anos 90 através de criadores de conteúdo, ou nós, os entusiastas ou fãs de cultura pop. Inicialmente, esse projeto seria em conjunto com um amigo, que é especialista, ele é professor, né? E me ajudaria na tradução. Houve um imprevisto e Paul teve que trabalhar no dia. Marcamos no sábado, mas só pudemos nos conhecer no domingo. Ficou inviável para o meu amigo e Paul perguntou se eu gostaria de adiar. Bom, eu esperei muito por aquele momento, então eu arrisquei fazer a entrevista sozinho. Bom, era um risco de cometer alguma gafe, mas tem vezes que a gente precisa bater os pés na água fria, pois nunca se sabe o dia de amanhã ou se teremos uma nova oportunidade, não é? Infelizmente, ainda não pude encontrar Delia, seu parceiro musical em diversos jogos. Você sempre vê o nome dos dois na maioria desses trabalhos e nessa entrevista vocês saberão o motivo. Como o YouTube desativou a caixa de mensagens e outras formas de contato particular com outros canais, ficou inviável me comunicar com Paul através desta rede. Pois é, tem vezes que o Google prejudica o nosso trabalho. Essa é a minha primeira entrevista internacional e ainda não tenho fluência em inglês, por falta de prática ou oportunidade em praticar isso mesmo. Portanto, já peço desculpas se houver falta de variações em tempos verbais ou palavras pouco precisas, ou até falta de variações de palavras. Dizem que a fluência vem de quando nos acostumamos a usar pelo menos umas 1.500 palavras. Portanto, isso é algo que vem com a vivência. Como tudo, há um tempo para se acostumar. Paul é extremamente generoso e um verdadeiro cavalheiro. Podemos ver o quanto ele viveu uma vida muito divertida, gostando do que faz. E espero que goste da entrevista e vamos começar.
Hello, hello.
Oh, there you are. Excellent. Excellent.
I was trying to create the
the background.
Yeah, background because the common key. So I must use to blue.
Right. Blue or green, right?
Yes, I want to prefer blue because don't recognize green. Yeah.
You're right. Oh, yeah,
Well,
very good. It looks good. It looks like you're in an arcade.
yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So I was trying to make the introduction, but I will make it after
Okay.
because this video you in recording, huh? Mais recording. Okay. But I some questions, but I tried. Well, we have two parts. Yeah, with Paul, with and between to David Delia.
Right.
Before.
Well, I have to try. He's not available this weekend, so I have to call him during the week. I'll call Dave during the week and try to arrange for him.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, my first question, I separated 20 questions.
20.
20.
Okay.
Because I'm very detailist, so I read too much in my blog about video games since 2009. Well, the first question, Mr. Paul, where you come your passion for music?
Oh, when I was a very little boy, when I was very small, I was maybe 3-4 years old. 3 años, 4 años, 4 años. My father played piano, and he played violin, and he played drums, and he sings. And I would watch him, and I just fell in love with music. So I started to play the piano. Not the violin, but I started to play the piano. And then guitar afterwards, guitar.
Yes, I feel things, your music, very, very variations. Greendog used Caribbean music. So
right.
This is very cool. So is the next question is relation you refer to your profession in SEGA. When come your opportunity for working with game music when go work in SEGA?
Okay. So this is a long story. I was selling audio equipment, stereos, televisions. I was a salesman. And one of the owners of a video game company came into my store and bought some equipment from me. So I asked him what he did for his business, and he told me he owned a video game development company. So I asked him, where do you get your music for the video games? And he says, well, right now, our programmers that program the video games are creating the music, but they're not musicians. So we're looking for a musician to come and work with us to create the music for the video games. So I told him, I said, you found him. I said, me. I'm the musician that will come and do music for your video games. So he said, come and see me on Monday. So I went to his office and he tested me. He said, I want you to create 3 songs and I want you to make those 3 songs into the Sega Genesis. I want you to put 3 songs into a Sega Genesis so it will play back. So I sat down at a desk, and I've never did this before, but by the end of the day, I wrote 3 songs. I had them in the Genesis. I was playing the songs for the owner, and he hired me. So now I was his musician. And 1 year later, Sega bought our company. So it was a smaller company to begin with, but then when 1 year later Sega bought the company, and I became the music director for Sega.
So that's great.
Yeah, it was a dream come true. It was so much fun. Yeah, to make music all day long for my job as my career was a dream come true. I always wanted to be able to do that, so it was wonderful.
Well, it's dream come true for me. Meet you because it's like
I'm just a guy that got lucky. I'm just a guy that got lucky. You know, I mean, being in the right place at the right time, asking the right question. You know, so Dave Delia, I think he thinks the same way. It's like we both got lucky. Dave Delia and I were friends very, very early, very young. We were childhood friends. I knew Dave and his family from the time I was in 6th grade, grade 6 in school. Dave and I went to school together. And then we moved to California together. And then when I got the job at Sega, I brought Dave in to do work with me at Sega as well. So, and Dave and I were just in the right place at the right time. We got lucky.
that's so great.
Yeah.
When this process from production from soundtrack of this game, have some inspirations with Danny Elfman from the movie?
Oh, for which movie?
Movie Batman Returns.
Oh, Batman Returns. Yes. Okay, very good. I had the opportunity to listen to the soundtrack from the original movie. Long ago, I actually met Danny Elfman many times. His band Oingo Boingo, Danny Elfman played in a band called Oingo Boingo, and Oingo Boingo used to rehearse in the same rehearsal studio my band rehearsed in. So we used to talk. But by the time he was doing Batman Returns, I didn't know him anymore because he was a big star. You know, I was still just working for Sega, and he was a big star. But I got a chance to listen to the soundtrack, and I was able to at least get some idea of the mood that Danny was trying to create with the music for the soundtrack. I didn't really I didn't pick up specific musical themes from the original soundtrack because I really wanted to try to create original themes for the game, but I wanted to try to capture the dark mood. The mood that Danny created in the soundtrack for the movie was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. But that was his music. He composed that music. I wanted to compose original music for the video game, but the inspiration was the mood. I heard the dark tones and the way that he put the track together. And Dave and I spent some time collaborating on that soundtrack. I bounced a lot of things off of Dave and got some of his ideas for some of the songs on that soundtrack as well. And that was, it was a lot of fun. It was so much fun because Batman, I was a big fan of Batman. From the time I was a little boy, I was a big fan of Batman. So to be able to do that video game was something really, really cool. So I wanted it to be really special. I still think Greendog was my all-time favorite game to do. It was my first one, and it was my favorite one. But Batman was special because of the fact that Danny did the soundtrack. I love Batman. I really enjoyed doing that kind of a dark themed style of music. So yeah, it was great. I had a good time. The sound effects were a lot of fun for that as well.
Yeah. You make the soundtracks too to sound.
Oh yeah, yes. At Sega, we did sound design and music composition. So we did both jobs. So Dave, myself, Tristan Dupree, all the people that worked at Sega in the different offices. If you're a musician, you're doing sound effects and you're doing the music too.
That's great.
Sometimes, like I would work, I forget which game it was, but I worked on a game with Dave where I did the soundtrack and he did the sound effects. So for that game, we split it up. But for Batman Returns, I did composing and I also did sound effects for that. And for Greendog, I did everything as well.
Very cool. Yeah. One of my favorites is Gotham City Act 1. When Batman, it is all scenario music from the first level. Wow,
you like that one, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Excellent.
In the intro too is very original, and Batman walking with the ice princess when attacked with penguin.
Right. Right. The penguin theme. Right. Yeah, exactly. Because Batman Returns, a lot of people that I've met that are into video games, it seems like that's the game that people like that soundtrack a lot. It's very interesting because when the game was released, the reviews that we got in the magazines, the gaming magazines, the reviews were good. But we had other games we did where the audio, the sound got better reviews. But now, years later, I talk to a lot of different people and everybody says, oh, Batman Returns. I love that game. I love the sound of that game. I like the music. I like the sound effects. You know, that seems to be a game that everybody really kind of gravitates towards. They really like that game. So I think that's great.
Yes, the soundtrack is very emotional, very dramatic. Since the first intro.
Right, that's what we were going for. We were going for that mood. Thank you, Danny Elfman.
The circus music when the ending is more different. The last level is interesting. The animations you see that this production went to.
You mean for the video game or for the movie?
It is from the game, the video game. Yes. You see the production.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. What my whole team, the artists, the graphic artists, the programmers, yes. We're all in the same office. We all work together. It's a whole team. So I start getting my musical ideas first when I see the artwork. So while I listened to what Danny was doing, I waited until our artists started drawing the backgrounds and they started drawing the characters, sprites, and then figuring out based on how they were drawing the characters and the backgrounds and what scenes we were going to do. That's when I started getting ideas about how I wanted to build the themes of the music from the beginning of the opening of the game all the way through to the final boss at the end, and even the credit rolling and all that. I mean, how do we want to treat all of that, you know? But yeah, that's very early on. I mean, in the process, that stuff comes first. You know, we first decide what scenes we're going to do, what levels we're going to create for the game, and where they're going to be staged. You know, is this going to be something in Gotham? Is this going to be something in the Batcave? Is this going to be where is it going to be? And then from there, we determine how do we want to treat that musically. And as the game progresses, sometimes things change. because people get ideas. The team gets ideas, and the game evolves as it's being developed. And so the music sometimes has to shift and change along with the ideas as they grow. But for this particular game, I think we all had a really solid vision about where the game was going to go from the beginning to the end. So the music that we planned for, I think, really is the music that we ended up producing, because we built that game very methodically, very consistently. Everybody had the idea, and we carried through with that. And again, Greendog was that way as well. Eternal Champions. Do you know the game Eternal Champions? Yeah, that was very different. Musically, that one went through a lot of changes. I mean, it went through a complete change. We started out with 15 songs, and then we threw them all away. And then we started from in the middle of the game development. We started over and put 15 new songs in there. The game designer, that was Mike Lathan, was the game designer for Eternal Champions. He had a change of ideas. He wanted a different style. He was looking for some kind of a hip hop thing at the beginning, and then he changed his mind in the middle because of the way the game developed. As the game was developing and the characters were developing, the scenes were developing, and the artwork was being produced, and then he felt like the music needed to be different. And so we had to scrap everything and start from the beginning. So we started all over again and had to build all of our music. Thank goodness our sound effects were still usable, but the music all had to start from scratch again. And for that game, because we had to do so much music in such a short period of time, I ended up hiring a lot of different musicians and had them write individual songs. So that particular game was there were 4 different musicians that composed music for Eternal Champions. So 4, maybe 5.
Have we 5 musicians?
4 or 5, yeah, something like that. I forget exactly how many. I know like Dave's brother Joe did some, and a friend of ours, Jeff Marsh, did some, and so a couple of other people did some as well. So
a lot of people. So with Eternal Champions, are you make the sound effects, right? Sound effects, but you participate from the soundtrack.
Yeah, but I didn't have time to do the sound effects and to do the soundtrack too. So other people did the music, and I just did the sound effects for that one.
Oh, yeah. That's great. This question about Eternal Champions, are you asking later? But great.
Yeah, I jumped ahead. I'm sorry.
No. When you make the soundtracks, you should concentrate in characters or in scenarios.
Oh, that's a good question. It's very different for every game. It depends on the way the game, like with Eternal Champions, it was levels, it wasn't scenarios. For Batman Returns, it was very much more scenario based. Yeah. We thought about the whole thing as a collective movie. We were looking for a very cohesive style. Even if it develops through the game and changes over time, we still wanted a thread of a theme to be woven through it. Greendog again was the same way. I think like Tailspins was more level by level. Tailspins was a little bit different, and Dinosaurs for Hire was also level by level. That was a very, very different kind of game, and every level had its own thing that inspired the music to be a certain way, and so we didn't really worry about the music being consistent from level to level. We wanted each song to just support that level the way that level was created. So that was a little bit different. It was more the term I use is episodic. Episodic versus cinematic. I mean, it's one episode of a TV show, right? Well, it's one level of a video game, and we just wrote the music for that one level and then the next level. So as opposed to a consistent theme that repeats itself, or a style that repeats itself throughout the entire game, that's a different way of approaching the writing of the music for a video game. So we have to take a look at each game and treat it the way it needs to be treated. You know, you kind of get a feel for it early on. When you start to see the artwork being created, and you start to talk about with the game designers what the gameplay is going to be like, you have, as a musician, I already get a feeling whether or not this is going to be episodic, or whether it's going to be just a thematic thing that's going to go throughout the entire game. So, yeah. So it's different.
Very different. So, in Sonic Spinball, you have any stories about Sonic Spinball?
So, yes, a short one. Sonic Spinball. I did not do the original Genesis game.
Oh.
I didn't do the original Genesis game. I gotta think about that. Was that Spinball? Yeah. So Spinball, I think all I did was port it to the Game Gear. You know, the Sega Game Gear, the handheld Game Gear. Yeah. So all we did was we ported the game from the Sega Genesis game. The Sonic Spinball was done by Sega. I'm trying to remember the name of that division There was what's that?
Something like Sega technical.
It's something like that. I'm drawing a blank. Maybe it'll come to me as we're talking. Yeah, but that particular group, Sega, there was a group of Sega people that all they did was work on Sonic. That's all they did was just Sonic. See, with Sega had in the United States, there was Sega Blue Sky, that was out of San Diego, California. There was Sega Midwest, that's out of Chicago. There was Sega Interactive, that was out of Diamond Bar, that's who I worked for. And then there was Sega, the main office up north and near San Francisco. And then there was the other Sega group that did nothing but Sonic. But they didn't have enough people to be able to port the Game Gear, the Genesis game into a Game Gear game. So they gave that to us to do. And so we ported the art and the gameplay exactly the same. But we wrote the music brand new. We put new music in it. We put different music in. We tried to replicate the sound effects as close as we could. But the music was all new. And on that particular game, there was a friend of mine, his name is Brad Gish, a very, very talented composer. And I brought Brad in to do the composing for that particular game. He always wanted to do a video game. He'd already done some movies, some television show scoring, but he never did a video game, and he always wanted to. And this was an opportunity for him to do some music for a video game. So I brought him in, and he composed the music for that particular game. And it was a blast. I think he did a phenomenal job. I think he did a really, really good job. But yeah, that was a lot of fun because it was the only time our division, Sega Interactive, that was the only time Sega Interactive had the opportunity to be able to work on a Sonic the Hedgehog game. You know? My paycheck, when I get paid every 2 weeks, has Sonic on it.
Yeah.
It had a picture of Sonic on it. My son, I only had one then. I have two sons now. They're men. They're grown up. But at that time, every time I got paid, he wanted to see my paycheck because he wanted to see the picture of Sonic, right? But I never got to work on Sonic because Sonic was handled by that one division of Sega. So. But yeah, so that was our one opportunity to do a Sonic game.
Let me see.
Yeah, I should remember their name, but I'm getting old.
You search for wiki too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Sega Studios. Sega Studios. That's what they're called.
Studios.
Sega Studios. Yes, that's the name of the group that does all the Sonic stuff. Yeah.
Oh,
Except for Spinball for the Game Gear, we got to do that.
yeah. Sega da América. Yeah.
Yes, Sega.
Sega. Sega.
Yeah.
Which instruments are used to make up the soundtracks?
Very good question. Excellent question. Okay.
Yes.
So, let me describe our development system. Okay? This is my desk at Sega. Okay? My desk at Sega. I have a Macintosh computer.
Oh.
I have a PC. I have a PC over here. I have a Sega Genesis machine in the middle, and there's a development card that goes in the slot in the top of the Genesis. And that card connects up to the PC. I write the music on the Macintosh, MIDI on the Mac. So MIDI on the Mac. Okay. Copy MIDI to the PC.
Oh.
Now Sega development system is called GEMS. Okay, the Sega development system is called GEMS. GEMS is a Sega Genesis with the card, with some software running on the PC, on the regular computer. Okay, connected with a parallel card, a parallel cable. Okay, when I bring the MIDI file into the PC, the Sega Genesis won't do anything. I have to create the instruments from scratch. I have to create the sound of a kick drum. I have to create the sound of a snare drum. I have to create the sound of a hi-hat, cymbals, bass guitar, pianos, organs, strings, trumpets. I have to create those sounds in the Sega Genesis machine using the PC and using the GEMS software. I use the GEMS software to be able to build these instruments. And those instruments will get loaded into the Genesis, and I'll use the actual sound chip in the Genesis machine so I can hear what it's going to sound like in the game. So the sound chip in the Genesis is its basic FM synthesis. It uses FM synthesis, frequency modulation synthesis. And we can use these things that are called operators and modifiers to be able to create sounds. That's all we had to work with. I think we had 8 voices. We had eight voices. 8. That's it.
8
So maybe a kick and a snare and a hi-hat and a bass guitar and a piano and an organ, and then 2 for sound effects.
You create all these things in PC?
Yes.
But you don't use real instruments.
No, none.
Whoa.
Yeah. Now
this is magic.
When we're writing the MIDI files, okay, on the Macintosh, the Macintosh is connected to some real keyboards, so that we can actually hear real drums or better sounding drums and pianos and strings and horns. We can hear that. But we only have 8 notes, 8 voices to work with. 8 is all we have. My hands are in the wrong place. We only have 8 to work with. So I have to be very careful about not making too many notes at the same time. If my music and the sound effects have more than 8 notes, not everything is going to play. So I always tried to do my music with 5, no more than 5. Music, 5 voices, and then maybe sound effects 3. Sometimes I would do 6 voices for music. I'd do 6, right? 6 voices for music and 2 for sound effects. And that's all I had to work with. So like kick, snare. But kick, snare, that's 2. Kick, snare, bass, that's 3. So we had to be very careful about when you wrote the music that there was space. There was space between the notes so that you didn't run out of voices. It's called multi-timbral. The multi-timbral capability of the Sega Genesis was 8 notes. So, but we to get an idea of the palette of the sounds we wanted, we would use real synthesizers while we were in the Mac. But then when it went to the Genesis, we had to use the synthesizer built into the Genesis to recreate sounds. So that was hard because it was very, very archaic technology. Even though for video games at the time, Sega Genesis was one of the best platforms on the market at the time, the synthesizer quality was very, very low. You know, I mean, it was very difficult to come up with great sounding instruments. You had to do all kinds of interesting things to make the music sound good. I think that when we finally moved on to other platforms like Sega CD, where you could use real instruments, real bands, real musicians, that was so much better. When we actually started even getting into things like Dreamcast and some of the other better platforms that were out there, the composing part of it became much, much better because we got to really produce great sounding music. I mean, really, really high-end quality music. But during the early days, the Game Gear only had 5 voices.
Right.
We had to do everything with 5 voices. With the Genesis, we had 8 voices. 8. We were spoiled with 8 voices, and the Game Gear had 5 voices to work with. So, it was interesting. It was difficult, but it was fun. It was a challenge.
The sound and college voices.
Yeah, each voice is equal to 1 note you can play. 1 note, one instrument at a time. So, one note. That's it. 1 voice, 1 note. Now that note could be a string, or that note could be a kick drum, or that note could be a piano, but 1 voice, 1 note. So at any given moment, the most you could have is 8 notes or 8 sounds. 8. That's it. 8 sounds. That's all you get for the whole game. So now each song, so let me explain it this way too. I had, for every game, I had a list of instruments that I used. Now, maybe in level number 1, or maybe say the opening, the theme song for the game, I would use certain instruments. But then the next level, I would use different instruments. I would create this bank of maybe 100 instruments that I'd use for the whole game. But I only would use certain instruments in a given level. So each level, I had to decide what sound I want, or what sounds, plural, do I want for that level, and then I would use those instruments in that level. Now, one of the tricks that we learned how to do relatively early on, in order to make it sound like there were more instruments, was to use something called a MIDI patch change. So maybe if on voice number 1, I did a couple of notes that was a piano, ding, 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 ding. And then right after that, I wanted this to be an organ, la, 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 la. I could change that voice from a piano to an organ. I could do a MIDI patch change, to change the instrument on the fly. So it would sound like we actually had more instruments in that song than we really did. They just can't all be playing at the same time. They have to play it at different times because you only have 8 voices to work with. So I hope that makes sense.
You use the soundtrack so from TV series or cinema. You don't use these references to use it. Which base do you use it from original themes?
So we we started to work on a Star Wars game. It didn't get released. For that Star Wars game, though, we did use music from the movie. We did use the original theme song, and we used the song from the cantina, and we used several other scenes, very, very well-known thematic theme songs for that game. And it was very interesting paring down, John Williams writes the music for Star Wars. John Williams is an incredible composer, and he has a whole orchestra, and I have 8 voices to work with. 8 voices, that's it. So how do I do a Star Wars theme with only 8 voices? It's not easy. I had to make one voice sound like 100 strings. I had to try to make one voice, so I would use 2 voices, and I did some trick with them to make one string sound like 10 strings or 15 strings. But we actually were able to create a soundtrack that when you listen to it, you go, that's Star Wars. That's the theme song. That's the cantina. I mean, it sounded remarkably like the original motion picture, only just coming out of a Sega Genesis machine. And that was very challenging because I didn't have to compose. I wasn't composing the music. The music was composed by John Williams. But my challenge was to make John Williams' music sound as close to the way John Williams recorded it as I possibly could, because people know that music. Everybody knows Star Wars music. It's not like I could have done it differently and everybody wouldn't have noticed. Everybody would notice very easy if it wasn't exactly the way it was supposed to be. So I tried to be as meticulous as I could in the way that we ported that music into the game. And so from that perspective, it was a different kind of challenge than I ever had before. And I learned some things, some techniques inside the Sega Genesis machine that I wouldn't have learned otherwise because I'd never been faced with the need to do that before. So all of a sudden, now I'm figuring out how to make a Sega Genesis sound like the orchestra that John Williams recorded with. And yes, it was still the Sega Genesis, but it was good. I think it still sounded quite good. Yeah.
Yes, so Star Wars is something like video games, but video games inspired in Star Wars. So
yeah,
something like that.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's my question is very specific. And speaking of challenges, when track film adaptation on TV series, don't you use a reading of the original track at all times, or did you try but something you own? But when you talk about...
Okay, so that's interesting. I think I know what you're asking, and there are times when I don't have the opportunity to decide whether or not I'm going to create my own music or I'm going to use the soundtrack from the movie. Because when we license a movie or a TV show or a car, whatever it is, sometimes in the license it dictates that we have to use their music. So I may not have, like with Star Wars, I had to use the John Williams soundtracks for the video game. I didn't have a choice. Now, there was another game that we did, Home Alone 2. We wrote all new music for that, and we didn't. That was easy to identify because the music in the movie was just backtracks. It wasn't stuff that everybody would remember, so we could use our own music and it would be just fine. There was another game that we did that was a movie called Cool World. And Cool World, yeah. It was a box office flop. It didn't do very well. And because it didn't do well, we didn't release the game. But we completed the game. The game was done. It was ready to be released, but the movie was so bad as far as how it performed at the box office that Sega decided not to invest money in releasing it. But that particular movie, there was very thematic stuff happening musically, but we opted at that time to go a completely different way. And primarily because of the fact that our adaptation of the game was very different than the movie. We didn't really follow the movie script that closely. We took ideas from the movie, but we didn't necessarily try to recreate all the different scenes of the movie. So it wasn't as important that the music also match up with what the scenes were in the movie. So we wrote our own stuff. But it's not. There's nothing really challenging about that. It's actually very easy. Either you're under contract and you have to use the music from the license that you have, or not. And if not, then you write your own music. That's why we were there. We were there to write our own music, to be able to compose and put forth our own music. So, and there was nothing challenging about that. That was fun. That's what we did.
So. That's great. I'm a huge fan from Cool World, the movie, but have we adaptation for Sega Genesis canceled? Yes.
Yeah, it was an adaptation for Sega Genesis, but it never was released. We never sold it.
And you make the music?
Yeah, I did.
Cool, my gosh. Yeah. I really see it. But have not anything anti-reference for this lesson.
So yeah, you'll never see that game on the market. Sega shelved it because the movie didn't do very well. It's interesting because I still see that movie pop on TV sometimes late at night. Once in a while, you'll see Cool World come on, and I'll watch it because I got to go see the grand opening. The day that it opened in the theaters, I got to see it. But I also got to see footage of the movie before the movie was done. We saw dailies, director cut dailies, because we needed to get our ideas in place in order to put the game out. That's, I think, the reason why we didn't follow the theme of the movie from beginning to end, because we were seeing things in little chunks, and they're filming the movie out of sequence. So we were getting our ideas from scenes that we had no idea where that scene really fits in the overall movie. It was coming to us in bits and pieces. And until the day the movie was released, we had no idea how all these scenes in the movie that we saw fit together as a whole movie. And by then we had already had the video game done. So by then it was too late to go change it. But we had our video game, and then we waited to see how the movie did, and the movie just didn't have very many sales in the box office. So I think Sega decided at that time it's probably not going to sell a lot of games, so they said, no, we're going to pass.
What a shame.
I agree. We put all that work into it, and I would have loved to have seen it at least have a chance to sell, but there's cost. They already spent the money on the cost of developing the game. That was a little over a year of a whole team of people working on building that game. And then there's the cost to manufacture the cartridges and to ship them and package them and get them into the stores and promote them. And by the time you're doing all of that, maybe they're not going to make their money back on it. Maybe they're going to end up taking a loss on it. And they were trying to avoid that. So, yeah.
What's the most incredible moment you remember when working with video games?
Oh, there were a lot of them. I think the very first time I saw my very first game was Greendog, and the very, very first time I read a review in a magazine about the game, and it was more than one magazine that came out that reviewed that game, and the game itself, the whole game, got some very good reviews from all of the magazines, and I was very proud that the music was specifically mentioned in a very positive way in all of the different reviews. And so, I started out my video game career kind of on a high, because that was a huge achievement for me. It was game number one, the very first one I did, and I think that was pretty amazing. After that, I mean, it was my whole experience for the years that I was at Sega was just nothing but great. I mean, it was amazing. I will say this. There was one event that did occur that was, to me, really great. It was really special, and it was very different. The game Swing Time, or it was the Spider-Man game. I didn't do it. Sega did it, but it was done by Sega, the headquarters up north. Did a Spider-Man game, and there was a song, and this was for Sega CD. It was a CD game, and the music was written by Spencer Nielsen. Spencer Nielsen was one of our head composers for Sega, and he got a gentleman by the name of Eric Martin, who was the lead singer for a very famous rock band called Mr. Big. And he got Eric Martin to come in and sing the theme song called Swing Time for that game. And later that year, the Consumer Electronics Show was in Chicago, and Sega put a band together to do a performance at the Consumer Electronics Show. And they got they got Eric Martin from Mr. Big to come and perform with the band. I did the sound. I did live sound because, they had all the musicians they needed to put the band together. So I just said, you know what, guys, I'm going to help out. I'm going to be there anyways. Why don't you let me take care of doing the sound? So I did the sound and got to watch the show while they were performing, and it was fantastic. But the night before at rehearsals, we all sat around in a circle with Eric Martin and Spencer and myself and a bunch of other folks from Sega, and we sang songs together. We just all sat there, and Eric Martin played acoustic guitar, and I played acoustic guitar, and a few other people played, and we just sang music together. We sang some Mr. Big songs, and so, and I meeting people like that. I mean, people like Michael Jackson would come through the studios and things like that. When I was working for Williams Valley Midway, which is a different video game company, we had all kinds of actors and actresses coming through to do sounds for our pinball games and for our video games and things like that. So I think getting to meet some of the celebrities that were working with us on some of these games was really thrilling. It was a lot of fun. I would have never been able to meet a lot of those folks had it not been for where I was and what it was I was doing. So that was fun. But personally, just my own personal accomplishments, I think it was just that first game. I still think Greendog is my favorite experience. Everything just clicked. The whole game just felt right. It clicked. Everybody worked really well together, and I'm very proud of the way that game turned out. It's still, for me, it's still fun to play.
It's true that the Greendog game would be bigger than Planet, and Planet's bigger from Greendog, but discarded in the end.
Yeah, so I can't go into that. I can't talk about that. There are some things that were happening behind the scenes. The person, Greendog, is about a real person. There's a person who actually is Greendog in real life, and so I think that negotiations for future Greendog games, it was difficult. There were some difficult negotiations, I think, that were taking place at that time. I wasn't privy to all the details of that. But I agree. I thought we were going to end up doing, Greendog 2, Greendog 3, Greendog 4. I thought we'd have more Greendogs, and we never got to do any more. It sold well enough that it should have been followed up. We should have had another game, but it just didn't work out. And I was very sad. I was very sad to hear that it didn't work out because I was very excited to work on the next episode. But, yeah, unfortunately, that never happened.
What's the scary moment, the saddest and the funniest? Do you have any scary moments when the saddest and the funniest I do have something.
So what is the scariest moment that I've experienced in doing video games?
Yes.
Okay, so the scariest moment that I experienced doing video games was when we were finishing up Eternal Champions. We basically, the whole team lived at the office for like 45 days. We didn't sleep hardly at all. Every other day, maybe we'd get 3 hours of sleep, but we were living there, and we were so close. If we didn't finish that game on time, it was not going to make it into the stores by Christmas. And Sega would have ended up losing an opportunity to make a lot of money on it. So there was a lot of pressure. So the team decided we were just going to not go home. We were just going to stay at the office, and we were going to work through until we got it done. And we did. And we basically lived there nonstop until the game was finished. And then we all took a week off afterwards just to go recoup and spend time with our families. But we were really worried. I was very worried that we weren't going to make the deadline, because when we're done creating the game, then the game needs to go through testing. And we were testing all along, but we had to finish testing. And then it had to get into the factory where the factory makes the game. Then it needs to get packaged and shipped to all of the distributors who are going to then send it to all the stores. And so all of that stuff takes time. If you don't get your game done by the right date, you're not going to be in the stores for the Christmas rush. And that's a problem. So that's the scariest thing that ever happened. Most of the other games that I worked on, our schedules were more comfortable. We had time to be able to get things done, and we were able to get it done on time, and there wasn't anywhere near as much pressure. But that was a scary moment. The saddest moment was, for me, I think, when I left Sega, when I actually left Sega and moved on and went on to my next opportunity. Sega was very much a family, because Interactive Designs was owned by a husband and wife, and they treated all of their employees like they were family, and they took great care of us, and they were really super great to all of us, and it was a hard decision. It was a hard thing to do for me to leave, but sometimes when it's time to leave, it's time to leave. You just have to move on and look for that next opportunity. And I'm glad that I ended up over at Williams Valley Midway. It was another great company. They did mostly arcade games at the time. They do home games now as well, but they did mostly arcade games, and it was nice to see that side of the industry. But it was very sad for me to leave my family, to leave my friends and family behind. I'm still in touch with several of them. Dave and I are still in touch with each other because we're old friends from even before Sega. But there are folks from Sega, even one of the owners, Rod, the husband, he and I still stay in touch with each other. We send each other little notes once in a while. But yeah, that was probably the saddest moment, was when I left there, because that was my first job in the video game industry. It wasn't my last, but it was my first, and it's the one I remember the most fondly. So.
Oh, and the funnest.
The funnest?
Funnest.
Ah, wow. So it's kind of interesting because we were working on a game that we developed in-house on our own, and it was called I got to think about it. Pet Detective, I think it was what it was called. It never got released. It never got released, but it was going to be a Sega CD.
Ace Ventura?
No. That's probably where I got that from, was Ace Ventura. No, I'm trying to remember the name of the game. Again, my old brain is not kicking in. But it was going to be the first Sega CD that we would have done. And so Dave and I got an opportunity to actually do full-blown music. We got a chance to produce with musicians, guitar players and drums, and do all of that stuff. And that was probably like the most fun I had. I think that was that was the beginning of seeing where things were going to go. Because everything up to that point was Genesis and Game Gear, and Genesis and Game Gear were great platforms, but they had their challenges. All of a sudden, the challenges were lifted because now we could do real CD quality music with real musicians. And so working on that particular game, it was, and Dave, if we get Dave to come in and do a follow-up session with you, he'll be able to remember the name of that game because he and I worked on it together, and his mind is really sharp. He remembers everything. He knows what we had for lunch 38 years ago on a certain day. He just remembers everything. So I think that was the most fun for me because we finally got a chance to break away from FM synthesis and into full CD quality production, and that was a blast. That was a lot of fun. And unfortunately, again, the game did not get picked up. We got a number of levels completed, and we pitched it to Sega, but they just wasn't sure they didn't think there was a market for it. So the marketing department put the cut. They said, "Sorry, it's not going to happen." And that's fine. Everything we do outside of buying a license, everything we do is spec. You put an idea together, you develop a certain amount of it, you pitch it to the leadership, and you hope that they like the idea. And if they do, they'll give you the okay to build it. And if they don't, then you have to stop and move on. So we had a lot of start and stops during my time there, but that was probably my funnest time.
When I listened to Paul Gadbois, I so remember Dave Delia. So Paul Gadbois, Dave Delia, I thought was the same person, but it's like a duo.
Definitely. Yeah, we're not the same people. But we're like family. You know what I'm saying? We are family. I've known Dave for so many years. Now I will tell you a funny story. There is another gentleman who also has done some music for video games, and his name is also Paul Gadbois. And if you Google me, you're going to see some games that are credited to my name, but I didn't do those games. The other Paul Gadbois did those games. So there's two Paul Gadbois. There's me, and then there's the gentleman. He's also from Canada. I'm from Canada as well, but he's from Canada, and he works for another video game company, and he does a lot of game design work, but he was also doing some sound effects and music for some games as well. I think he might have worked on Guitar Heroes at one point, if I'm not mistaken. He might have worked on Guitar Heroes. But I called him one day. I called him on the phone. I called his company and asked to talk with him. And then, he answered, "Hi, this is Paul." I said, "Hi, this is Paul." He goes, "No, I'm Paul." I said, "No, I'm Paul." He goes, "Oh, you're the other Paul." I said, "Yes, and you're the other Paul." And we talked, and I still actually am connected to him. On Facebook. He and I are actually still connected on Facebook. So
we have a mirror match. Paul,
Right, yes, absolutely,
Paul.
yes.
No,
It's
man.
my doppelganger, although we don't look anything alike, but yes, that's correct. He's my mirror. He's the other Paul Gadbois that happens to also do video game music in a parallel universe. No.
Yeah. But in Home Alone, was the work that you were also the director of productions, according to websites. This confirms what is like what was it like with producing this track?
So for Home Alone?
Yes.
Yeah, so for Home Alone, it was very easy because I didn't do anything. That was Dave Delia's game. So I was the music director for Sega. So for all of the games that we produced, I was given music director credit because Dave reported to me. I was Dave's boss. So I was his manager. So I got music director credits, but Dave did all the work. I basically oversaw things. I would give Dave some suggestions about, how to treat a certain song or maybe how to treat a certain event with a sound effect. I would give him suggestions, but mostly the work was Dave. Most of the creativity was Dave. I did very little on that particular game. So that's really a good one to hit Dave with, because I'm sure he'll have a lot of ideas and memories about when he was working on that game. It has me as music director for Spinball. It has me for music director at Home Alone 2. And that's true. For those two games, I didn't compose and I didn't create sound effects. Those were basically some things that were done with other musicians, and I was just leading the team. But I wasn't doing any of the actual work. I was just leading the team. And that's management. That's just management stuff, and these musicians are so good that it was easy. I don't really have to lead them. I just have to say, here's your game, go do it. And they do a great job, and it was simple. I had good people that were working for us, and so, my job was easy. When all I had to do was music direct, it was easy. That's why I always tried to do games, because I wanted to work too. I didn't want to just manage people. I wanted to create games, and so, that's why I did the games that I did.
So we come to know what it's like to be chief. So the big boss.
Yeah, right.
It's so automatic.
Yeah, the big boss is not all that big of a deal. It's really not. The most important thing about being a big boss is having good people that are working with you. If you have good people that are working with you, then you'll be successful. And if you can help them be successful, everything is good. So, it's not difficult.
Have a horizontal lead.
Right. And I agree. I agree that if an organization is successful, the leadership has to be good. Otherwise, the organization can't be successful. But I don't take credit for that, because at Sega, the people above me were really, really good. The Nakamotos, Rod and Nancy, they were our executive leadership for our division. They were fantastic. They knew how to treat people well. They knew how to find good people and hire them. They knew how to set expectations, and everybody was ready to do their job and get it done. They built a great team. So I was the next layer down. I was a director. All the directors, the director of art, the director of programming, and me, the music director, our jobs were a lot easier because we were able to hire good people. So, and when you've got good people, you take good care of them. When you have good people, it makes everybody's job much easier. So we worked hard. Believe me, we all worked very, very hard to do all the games that we did. But working hard was not hard. Working hard was easy because we were having so much fun. It was so much fun. Working hard was, if we weren't working hard, we were sad because we wanted to make more games. We wanted to put out as many video games as we could. And we wanted those video games to be the best they could. So being a leader was nothing. To me, it was more important that I was a composer and a sound designer than it was that I was a director. Director is a title. But what I did was I composed and I did sound effects, sound design. That's what I did. My title was director. My job was sound design and composer.
This is very noble. This is very noble. Very noble.
Oh, it's reality though. It's. I appreciate that. That's a very, very nice thing for you to say, but it's so true. You know, there's a saying: when you have fun working, you're not really working. When you enjoy the work you do, you never work a day in your life. And that's the way it was at Sega. Everybody there worked really hard, but nobody would say they were working. We would go to work to play. You know, our play was making video games. And because everybody was on the same page, everybody was there for the same purpose. We had a common set of goals. It was easy to be successful. You know, when we didn't do well, when a game we produced didn't do well, everybody felt it. Everybody accepted the responsibility for the game not doing well. And when the game did well, everybody rejoiced and we had fun and we celebrated with each other because it was a team effort. So the idea of leadership in an organization like that is just purely organizational. It's not functional. It doesn't really have anything to do with what we do every day for our job, because I never had to lead these people. These people were self-motivated. They were self-managed. They were gung-ho to do a great job and to get it done. And, you know, I never had to call them up and say, you got to get into work and you got to work harder and I need you to work overtime. I never had to say any of that stuff. Everybody was always there. Everybody was always working. Sometimes I had to say, listen, guys, you've been here for 14 hours today. Go home, get some rest, go spend some time with your family. You know, they just wanted to keep going because they were having fun. So that's the most of a manager that I was. Sometimes I'd tell people they had to go home because they were there too many hours, you know. So my job's easy.
Because for this, the games are made with love, né? It's a happy sense.
Absolutely.
Did you have any story with Eternal Champions?
Yeah, he just recently passed away. Yeah, we lost Mike.
Did you meet him? Did you meet Mike?
Oh no, I know Mike very well. I know Mike very well. Mike was the game designer for Greendog.
Oh.
Yeah, Mike was from Sega up north, but Mike spent a lot of time down at Sega Interactive. He was in our office all the time. Every other week he would be coming down and spending time with us to work on different projects. So I knew Mike very well. Tristan Dupree, actually, he was one of the other musicians. He came on to Sega just before I left. And he and I were talking maybe about 3 weeks ago for about 20, 30 minutes. And he had mentioned that he had heard that Mike had passed away. And then he sent me a text message confirming it. He sent the obituary to me to let me know for sure that he had passed away. So it's sad. I mean, just like in every family, there's times when there's difficulties, right? And Mike had a lot of work to get done. He was in charge of a lot of different things. And so while sometimes he had to, you know, he worried a lot. I'm just going to say that. He worried a lot because, like Eternal Champions, like I said, we were living in the office for the last 45 days trying to get it done by the deadline. And that was a lot of pressure on his shoulders. He was the game designer. He had a lot of pressure on his shoulders. So, you know, I think back about those days, and I feel bad that he was as stressed sometimes as he was because he had that much pressure on his shoulders. The rest of us, we felt it, but we still were having so much fun working on the project, you know. But I think about Mike, and I kept in touch with him through other people throughout the years, and he really mellowed out. You know, he really became a very relaxed guy later on in life. You know, he still, was always a big supporter of our division. You know, he and I just, Greendog was a huge accomplishment for both of us. I mean, we both just, I loved what he did with, and the way he helped us out to be successful with that game. And he worked on some other projects with us as well, but Eternal Champions was a little bit more stressful. but I felt more bad that he was stressed than the way he was stressed. You know, I mean, because I wanted him to be able to relax because I knew our team had it. I knew our team was going to deliver. I knew that everybody was committed to getting the game done. And I just wanted him to be able to take a deep breath and relax. He didn't deserve to be that stressed. He was that good of a guy that he didn't deserve to be that stressed. So I wish we would have all been able to instill in him more. Mike, it's okay. It's going to be great. We're going to do this. It's going to make a lot of money for Sega. It's going to be a success. Relax. But we were too busy working, and we didn't have a chance to, you know, we were with each other every day. He wasn't with us every single day. When he would come down and work with us, he was stressed. But to hear that he's gone, it's a shame because he was a great game designer. You know, I mean, he definitely knew how to do his job very, very well. And yeah, he's going to be missed by a lot of people. He made a big name for himself in the game industry for sure.
I love very much Eternal Champions. So in the time we have Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter 2, but Eternal Champions is like some comic books.
Yeah,
it's very funny, but Eternal Champions released it in that time, but it's some like a competition with these games, Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat, but in Sega Genesis too. It's very funny, but a competitive between.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Well, because Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat were first. They came out first. You know, Eternal Champions came out later, right? And I think because of the fact that Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter came out first, they were definitely more in competition with each other. They were trying to beat each other out. They were trying to do more and more things to make their game the best game, you know, to make their game the most popular game, right? And that's fine. Eternal Champions, we had something hard to do because those two other properties were very, very firmly established. Everybody knew Street Fighter. Everybody knew Mortal Kombat. Toasty! Everybody knew everything about Mortal Kombat, right? I mean, Mortal Kombat was huge, right? What's this Eternal Champions? Oh, everybody was saying, oh, Eternal Champions, there's just trying to be another Street Fighter, just trying to be another Mortal Kombat. But we did some things in that game that were different, and we did some things in that game that I think made it stand on its own 2 feet. But it was another side-scrolling, hoppy-jumpy fighting game, you know, yeah, just like Mortal Kombat was, just like Street Fighter was. Yes, we wanted to get into that genre. It was a very successful genre. Kids were loving to play these games, so it was a good idea to do it, you know. But I was lucky enough that I got to do some things on 2 games. I did Eternal Champions, but I also worked at Williams, so that was Street Fighter, or not Street Fighter. I'm sorry, Mortal Kombat. So I worked with the Mortal Kombat team with Ed Boon and with Dan Forden and the people that actually produced Mortal Kombat, because that's a Williams Valley Midway title. So when I was the manager of the sound department for Williams, my team was working on Mortal Kombat games as well. So I got a chance to work on 2 of the big 3 fighting games. At least at some level, you know, in some perspective. I didn't write music. That Dan Forden had the music and the sound effects down. He was the best. He definitely was one of the best sound designers and musicians out there. So he had that very well covered. Now at that point I was really just managing. You know, I had 7 musicians that were there doing sound design and composing, and all I was just the manager. But it was great to work on those games, to have those games being developed in our house. So, yeah. But yeah, I think Eternal Champions was a solid 3rd title to have in that genre. When I think about the big 3 fighting games that are out there, you know, those are the 3. You got Mortal Kombat, you got Street Fighter, you got Eternal Champions. Those are the 3 big ones. Williams was trying to come out with another one called War Gods. And we actually released War Gods, but I think it only got released as an arcade game. It didn't get released on a home platform. It was just for arcade only. And we were trying to make that the next possible big title. Didn't make it. It didn't make it. But Eternal Champions still made it. So, Eternal Champions, did better than War Gods, and that's something to be said because, War Gods wasn't a bad game. It's just that, there just wasn't enough room for it in the industry. People had all the games they needed for fighting, So, anyway.
So, War Gods is from Nintendo 64, does it?
Well, they may have actually, after I left Williams, they may have actually ported into the Nintendo 64. By then, Matt Booty, I think, from Williams was actually working at the Williams for the home game side of the house, and I replaced Matt. Matt was the sound department manager, and then he became game designer. And he worked on War Gods, and then he left the arcade side and went to the home side, and I think he brought the War Gods title over there. But I don't know how well War Gods did in sales. I don't think it was quite as much a success as Eternal Champions. I still think Eternal Champions was a bigger success, but I might be wrong. I didn't keep up with it. It was a great game. I was actually the voice of one of the characters. I got to do the voices. All the yeah. I got to record myself, so my voice is in that game. Yeah.
Oh, but it's great. I don't remember. Have you on credits? No credits.
Oh yeah, no. There's no need. They just called me into. They said, "Hey, Paul, we need another person to do some grunts for one of the characters. You want to do it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" So I just went in and did the grunts. I'm nobody special. There's no need for them to give me credit for that. So I think everybody in our sound department did one of the characters' sound effects. I think everybody wanted to get in on that game to do grunts and screams, that type of thing. So, but I don't think that most people didn't get credit. I think they give credit for the art, they give credit for the programming, they give credit for the composition and the sound effects. But in that case, they didn't give us credit. But if we were a famous actor, or if we were a professional voiceover actor, because sometimes we would hire professional voiceover people, our contract with them, we had to give them credit in the game. But we were just staff employees. They didn't have to give us credit for that. Just come on in and scream in the microphone for a while and we'll call it a day. Okay, great.
So why?
You know what? Dave Delia's youngest son, Dave Delia, his little boy Nicholas is the voice of Greendog. When Greendog gets hit with the frisbee, ow, ow. He says, "Out." That's Nicholas.
Nicholas was son of Dave Delia.
Dave Delia is his first baby. His youngest son, or his oldest son, his first son, yeah. He was the voice of Greendog.
Historic.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
That's so epic, great. So, I have a question about Eternal Champions. Why Eternal Champions don't have an arcade version?
Why Eternal Champions doesn't have an arcade version?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. But I can guess. The arcade industry, at least at some point in time, when Eternal Champions was released, when all of the Eternal Champion games were released, the arcade industry was going downhill. It was going down. It wasn't making any money. Kids didn't want to go put money in a machine to play one game. they wanted to go to the store and buy the game, take it home and play it a lot. So home games, because the home games were very good. The graphics were great, the gameplay was great, the sound was great. They didn't want to go to the arcades anymore. So I think that there was a big downturn in arcades. Pinball machines were starting to go away. They still make pinball machines, but not like they used to. Very, very few pinball machines are being made nowadays. Arcade games were starting to go down. There were very few arcade games that were being manufactured. Maybe it's picking up again, but I think that it just didn't make sense. It monetarily, financially didn't make sense to make that game on a platform that wasn't performing very well. They had it in Sega. If anything, they would put it on a Super Nintendo, or they would put it on a PlayStation, or they would put it on an Xbox, but not on an arcade game. They would make so much more money to actually put it on another gaming platform than it would be to put it on an arcade platform. So I think that's the reason why it never went arcade, is because arcade games were not doing very well. You know, when an arcade game was made, maybe they would sell 8,000 units, 10,000 units, because they're expensive, right? And when you put it out on a CD, they sell hundreds of thousands of units. You know, they make so much more money off of the CDs and off the cartridge-based games. That's the moneymaker right there. That's the place to produce it and to sell it. But that's a good question.
So thank you. But so was a game made for new generation? It's for consoles.
Yes, Eternal Champions. It was strictly targeted as a home game. It wasn't made for arcade consoles.
So what is the like production for Tailspin soundtrack? Tailspin here in Brazil called Esquadrilha Parafuso. And yes, some lights like spin, Tailspin. Don't you remember any story, right? The Disney animated series.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. When Tailspins came out, when we were making the game, I really had not watched that series. I wasn't watching a lot of Disney stuff at that time. Everything Disney, but prior to that, I didn't really know much about it. So other than what I got from my research by watching some episodes to get an idea of what the series was about, and musically the way they treated it, you know, I mean, I had to go off of that. I had to pretty much decide what we wanted to do with the music based off of that. And, you know, for that one, the only thing I can remember was sitting around and talking with Dave and some other folks and talking about how we wanted it to be, you know, very very kid friendly, very Disney like, but we had determined that we didn't necessarily want to copy the Disney music. We didn't want to do exactly like Disney. We wanted to do our own music, but, you know, in the style of Disney, but not Disney music. Number one, I don't think that we would have been able to or wanted to pay, because you have to pay when you license music, right? So if we wanted to use the Disney soundtracks for that, we would have had to pay for that. That would have cost money. So instead, we just decided we wanted to produce that ourselves. But, you know, I really can't think of anything specific about the way that game was produced. There wasn't any like really notable stories about the way Tailspins was produced. I know I had fun doing it. I can remember our part went really fast. The music and the sound effects for that game actually, it took no time at all. It was really amazing. It was just like, it was so quick. At first I thought, wow, this is great. If we can do every game this fast, we could do a lot of games. But then the very next game after that, I think might have been Dinosaurs for Hire, and that one took a long time. But the Tailspins was, it was easy. It was effortless. the music just kind of happened, you know, it just kind of came to us, you know, and the sound effects, the same thing. Every time a level was developed and we saw what was happening, we just immediately knew what kind of sound effects and what kind of music we wanted for that level. But that is also one of the things about that game, is that we didn't plan on the music ahead of time. We were kind of like building it as the game was being developed. We would do a song, but the song came like that. You know, we spent maybe one day working on one song and it was done. You know, where sometimes you'd spend 4, 5, 6 days working on one song to try to get it just the right way. With Tailspins, it seemed like one day the song was done, and then the next song, 1 day, 2 days maybe. So, yeah.
And one of the songs I like the most is that of New York. Yes, the level New York is.
Yes.
So, what the elements were you inspired to create it? To create our songs from
honestly,
each level.
The artwork. The artwork was my inspiration. Now, for New York, I've also been to New York. I'm from New York. Not New York City, New York State, but I've been to New York City before. And there's a feeling in New York. When you're in New York, you have a feeling. It's like when I go to Washington, D.C., I have a feeling. You know, there's a certain thing about being in certain places that make you feel something, right? So when the New York level came up, like I said, it was one of those, I just knew how I wanted to treat it. I didn't even have to think about it. It was just naturally, it just flowed right out of me. It was one of those things. If I had to think about what I was thinking about then, I would have to say I wasn't thinking. I was reacting. I saw some of the background art, so I had an idea of what the street was going to look like, and I knew what it felt like to be in New York City. And boom, there was the musical theme for that. So it was easy.
What? That's great. So
I wish every game was like that. You know. Yeah, that was effortless.
That's question is interesting. Have any project when you participate, but they were discarded?
Yes. Unfortunately, yes. Many. And this is going to be the one that we have to ask Dave if we get together with Dave. But that there was that one project where, well, again, Cool World didn't get released, and you know, and we put a lot of effort into building that game up, but that didn't get released. But that wasn't an original title. That was an adaptation from a movie. But that one, oh my goodness, I really can't believe that I can't think of the name of the game. I wish I could get Dave on the phone right now and ask him what the name of the game was. But I'll tell you the premise of the game. Oh. There was two. There was another one called Baby Boomers. There was a game called Baby Boomers that never got released. And Baby Boomers. And basically, I mean, if I can remember the storyline for this video game, it took place on New Year's Eve, December 31st. And all these parents were at New Year's Eve parties all around the city. And they all left their little children with babysitters with this one big babysitting service. And at midnight, the computer systems crashed and all the babies got out and they scattered all over the city and they were doing all kinds of things to get in trouble. They were just ruining the city. And so as part of the gameplay, you had to be able to try to, you know, get these babies and collect them and bring them back in and get them back to the babysitting center before the city was destroyed. The gameplay of that, the way that we talked about it, sounded like it was going to be so much fun. You know, it sounds like a kind of a strange concept right now, but at the time and thinking about some of the gameplay things that we were going to be doing with it, it sounded like it was going to be an absolute blast. Unfortunately, it never got released. And our whole team felt very, very let down by it not getting released, because that was one of our in-house developed concepts that we really were behind and we really wanted to see get picked up. And because it didn't, it was a bit of a letdown. But it was very doable. We could have produced it, and I think it would have been a great game to play. But it just never got picked up. We put a couple of demo levels together, and then we had to drop it. And then this other one that I can't remember the name of was really all about this person, whoever's the player, trying to travel around the world to find different treasures. And as they're traveling, they would come upon these different animals, and they would talk to the animals and ask the animals for suggestions or hints on how to find the treasure. So it was a little bit like Monkey Island in a way, but it was a lot more sophisticated than Monkey Island, because the characters would respond with song, with music. I mean, there'd be like the player would have to try to find a platypus, and it would ask these toucans up in a tree if it knew where it could find a platypus. And then the toucan birds would sing a song about platypuses to the player. And in the song, in the lyrics, there were hints about where the player needed to go in order to find a platypus. And if they find the platypus, then they've solved that part of the puzzle, and then they move on through the game. And I'm just drawing a blank on